So in that celebration of diversity that we have in Chicago, because we pride ourselves with the food, like we got all the food you want.
Right.
Any neighborhood offers the best of that country. But there's these undertones of you don't belong here. You're not one of us. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's a little more out there. I mentioned before that the gang culture is a big part of Chicago. I'm very convinced, no one that was born and raised here cannot say that they know somebody or has family that's in a gang. I have cousins that's all they did. And it wasn't really something like different. It was kind of normal. It was kind of normal because gangs are everywhere. Even in my neighborhood, New Life Community Church, which is our church network that we belong to. In my neighborhood, in the big majority, chunk of it, there's two main gangs, the Latin Kings and the 2-6. And when my dad planted the church here in Little Village, he planted it unknowingly on the King side, on the Latin King side. And it was our dream for years to plant another church on the other gang territory, which is the 2-6 side. Because we found ourselves inviting people to church, wonderful people that we met, guys that I grew up playing soccer with, just naturally like, yo, come to church Friday night, pizza night or whatever. And they said, we can't cross Lawndale. That'll get us killed. And even in the same neighborhood, in the same zip code, there's an unspoken rule. You just can't cross.
Yeah.
And because God is good and because God crosses any lines, we were able to plant another church just a few blocks away from that first church to accommodate the other gang line. And that's where I serve. I serve there on the east and the west side of Little Village, walking distance from my house, walking distance from the other church. And we just say, all right, we'll follow these rules because the gospel can do that. The gospel can cross the line. So there's, like I said, we have a big network of churches, and New Life really believes in being a church where you could walk to, a neighborhood church where what you see outside is what you're going to see inside. So we have a Cantonese service in our Bridgeport area that neighbors Chinatown. We have Spanish services in Spanish neighborhoods and English services and in all sorts of neighborhoods, since obviously most people can do that. And even in our service, in our church, we have English and Spanish accommodate the first generation and the second and third and beyond. And so I serve there preaching and teaching and doing some leadership stuff. I belong to a great team. I think it makes a difference. We look for people from the community. We look for people that we can raise up. And I think it's always better that way sometimes, where people understand the codes and the dynamic of the city and the dynamic of the neighborhood. We can speak the language. We've all kind of gone through things. And with that, the gospel uses that, he uses our personality and our upbringing, kind of like Moses knowing so much before he went back. We see that as a big component of what we do in church.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, Ken. So, ideologically, there would be some who would say that system is wrong. That system's broken. There shouldn't be imaginary lines. There should be unity. And I think probably we would both agree there's something so beautiful that as that happens. Yet you guys have managed to flourish in the midst of a broken system. Can you talk to that a little bit? Because I think what takes place right now in the church globally, we've got brokenness all over the place. Like we're arrogant to think that as a society, as a culture, as the human race, that we are no longer experiencing brokenness. We have brokenness all over the place, and yet the gospel shines bright in the darkest places. So can you speak a little bit to that, just ideologically saying it's not fixed yet, but we want to be a part of the solution. We don't want to just point out the problems. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I would love to. I kind of want to share stuff that we've talked about actually between me and you.
Yeah.
I know through Jerry kind of letting you know what's been going on too. And as you guys have seen on the news,
Yeah.
the United States has been suffering for a long time. But now it's been kind of the tipping point again. Hopefully this is the tipping point that we don't need to relive again. But hey, there's no Black people that really live in Little Village.
Right.
There's a neighborhood that's maybe 6 blocks away from me, and it's the Black neighborhood. And there's churches there that are preaching the same gospel as we are. And they're doing the best they can within their gang lines and imaginary lines. And, there's a subculture within every neighborhood. But to kind of talk about that, I want to share what we've gone through these past few days. Yes. It sounds like a movie script, but God knows that if it was a new movie, it was a horrifying movie. With this, with the pain that the city is seeing in Chicago, we're mourning the death of George Floyd. Yep. in Minneapolis. Chicago's no stranger to those type of incidences. Yes. And my father-in-law is a Chicago police officer. He's an elder at his church. He grew up in the rough areas too. He knows the ropes. He understands things too. Yep. And so it's kind of interesting because we see both sides of things, right? I think that's healthy. I think it's dangerous if we pick a side, right? Because I believe that God is the side we need to pick, and look at both sides, saying that he died for both, or 3 sides or 4 sides, because there's a million now. Right. But so with the wave of protesting, which I really see I see that expression, I see the pain, and I don't understand it fully, even though I'm a minority, even though I grew up in this hood, right, in a underprivileged, under-resourced neighborhood where gang violence is outside. Right now, there's fireworks or gunshots happening. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't see blue lights, so we're okay. But this wave of pain, we all kind of feel it, especially the inner city. We all kind of belong to that pain. I've had my share of running with the police, running with gang members, all sorts of stuff growing up. And we feel that, and we want to be sensitive to that. But unfortunately, last Sunday, so that was just about a week ago, right around as our online service was wrapping up, there was a wave of looters that came through our neighborhood. And those looters broke into a couple stores. And what happened was those looters that came into our neighborhood were Black. And we had some gangbangers that ran in to the store where the looters were stealing items. And what's been going on in Chicago has been looters kind of break in and the neighborhood follows. Right. There's a tough time. Little Village, on top of being a very beautiful, rich, and cultured community, is also suffering even through this COVID-19 wave. Right now, Little Village, this small corner of Chicago, has the most cases in the whole state of Illinois. And it's one of the worst neighborhoods in the whole nation of the United States that has the most cases. I think it's around the top 6 or 7, something like that, in the whole country. Wow. So the joblessness that we see here, even in our community, in our church, a lot of our brothers and sisters have no work. The other new life in our community, the one on the other gang side, has experienced death either in the church member family or a family member of a church member's family at least once a week since March of COVID-19. So the pain here is it's deep. We see it differently. I mean, my wife's family, 20 minutes up, they're fine. Wow. Right now, today, it's a predominantly white neighborhood. But when she grew up, it was a Puerto Rican neighborhood with a lot of Puerto Rican kings. There's a different, even in the class and in the social status. Little Village, with that disparity that they've had, what we've had this whole time, when the looters came in, something changed. I would expect, like most neighborhoods in Chicago, for the community members to run and grab too. I mean, they're not getting food. A lot of people don't have enough for medicine or food. But what happened was the gang members saw the looters and they actually started defending the store, and they got very violent.
Right.
And as of that moment, things got very ugly that Sunday. There was about 300 Latin Kings that took over our main street. Little Village can also be called 26th Street.
Right.
That's just
26. Yeah.
Well, 26th Street is like the business street.
Yeah.
Where all the restaurants and grocery stores and you know, the haircuttery, everything, it's like the main avenue through the main vein of Little Village. They call us sometimes, for a long time, it was even bringing more money than the Magnificent Mile downtown, which is where all the Louis Vuitton and things. Wow. That's where I saw you first. That
not like I was shopping in Louis, but yeah.
No, you were walking down with that hat. That's it. Yeah. We go window shopping when we go downtown. Yeah. So, you know, this turned into a race war by Sunday afternoon, midday. Wow. There was 300 Latin Kings on one side of 26th Street and the 26 on the other side. There was about 200, 300 on the other side of that main street, because that's where the looters were coming in to attack, and they took control of the neighborhood. They were just pretty much targeting anybody Black that drove through our neighborhood. And we have a perimeter. Every neighborhood has a perimeter, and they stood at those perimeters and were just targeting all sorts of people that were just driving, whether they were driving looking for an opportunity or if they were driving home. And, you know, that's kind of painful. It created a problem on top of a problem. Right. The diversity aspect now turned from something maybe celebrated to something very violent and targeted. Like I said, it was a nightmare. That Sunday leading all the way through Wednesday, every day we heard more gunshots than usual. We saw helicopters flying around the sky at all moments of the day. There wasn't a moment where 26th Street, our main street, wasn't empty with gangbangers. They were just out with their, you know, big rammers, which is those big old trucks, with baseball bats and pit bulls. I mean, it looked like a movie scene. I couldn't make it up.
Unbelievable.
Sometimes what happens in these type of neighborhoods is that the police presence is a little lower. And there was a couple times where I had to go out there and I talked to some of those guys. I teamed up with the other pastor, and we went to go talk with these gang members. Our church, New Life Community Church, has a branch. It's called New Life Centers, and it's kind of our non-for-profit that goes and does a lot of community activities throughout Little Village and a couple other neighborhoods. And they've built a very, very, very strong relationship with the gang members in our neighborhood. I was part of a team that helped create a probation program that gives guys that have been locked up at a young age an opportunity to do community service and go through a program with us. And they didn't know, you know, that we're church people, you know, we're church boys. Right. So we're going to talk about the truth, and we're not dumb. We know what's going on. And it was a really awesome ministry. And right now it's still growing. It's still moving. It's actually gone down, the violence in Little Village. And I believe it's because God had a lot to do with that ministry. He had everything to do with it. And so using all those resources that we've built into the neighborhood, with gang members, with the commander of the police, with the alderman that serves here, with security, and with even with citywide, with the judicial system here too, we were able to be a presence in that chaos. And man, trust me, it was scary to go out there. I mean, I've grown up in this, but this was a movie scene. I saw 2 police officers on every corner standing in between a crowd of at least 40 to 60 gang members, listening to their music, smoking weed, and just waiting. And the church was able to go and mend a relationship between gangs and police for that night, and then for the next night, and for the next night. That to me that's phenomenal.
I mean, look, man, the position that you have for unity is so incredible. When you say we talk to the commander of the police department, the aldermen, and the leaders of the gangs,
right,
and the younger kids who are growing up in gangs but trying to
right.
make better decisions. That's incredible.
It's
I've been watching some of the stuff you're posting, and it looks like in some senses like revival taking place on the street of people who would typically bring hate to the conversation, choosing to embrace. Like, am I reading that wrong? Am I seeing it wrong? Or is that really what's happening?
That's it. I mean, there was a sense of thankfulness to these gang members from community members, because they were keeping us safe. Kind of weird, right? Like, they typically terrorize and they'll accidentally shoot a little kid playing on the corner, or, friendly fire and it hits somebody. Or I've been in cars where we've gotten shot at because they thought one of us were a gang member, or a brick thrown in our window. And these guys are just, the neighborhood guys. And now they're defending the mom and pop stores a few blocks away. And they're defending my corner, which is one of the most violent in Little Village, to stop people to come in and terrorize, because this is our neighborhood. So it's a weird dichotomy of like events to create like the bad guys become the good guys, and then the good guys team up with the new bad guy good guys. This is a collective of church people, Matt DiMatteo, Pastor Chris, Pastor Paco. We were all just, and I played a small role in this, but I believe that through the presence, I think Matt DiMatteo, he was my youth pastor growing up, and he's the director of New Life Centers. He's really he has his foot in with the mayor, with the police, with the gangs. He said it best. He said the gospel these past few days was just being present, being there, being in the middle of it. I didn't want to go outside. No, I even called Jerry. I called him. I was like, bro, I'm not trying to die tonight over a grocery store. I don't think that's worth it. I have a wife, I have family that I want to, take care of when I'm older. I don't think that's where I should go. And slowly the Lord was taking parts of me away and giving me new ideas. And I'm not a planner. I'm not like this super, like, oh, I got a revelation. No, at some point in the evening, I was standing in the middle of a sea of gangbangers, talking to them and just being around. And they've seen me. They know that I'm not the guy that's shooting. I'm the guy that's going outside and be like, can you not stand on my corner, please?
Right.
We're having a barbecue. Can you go stand on the other side, And the same guy that invites them to church. So I want to answer your question.
Yeah.
The racial gang war that happened, that just broke out in our neighborhood, in this corner of the city, between, typically it was more so North Lawndale, which is right above Little Village. There needed to be healing there. There's always been a black versus brown gang problem, but this just highlighted it. The team of pastors and church leaders and outreach workers were able to get a truce between a black gang and the Hispanic gang on the other side of the neighborhood, all because of the church, because they contacted the same guys in the black neighborhood that are out on the street working with those guys and showing them love unconditionally, and said, hey, we need to be unified. We can't be killing each other while we're mourning the death of someone else.
Yes.
While we need to unite to help heal and fix a bigger problem. that creates a lot of disunity between us, Black
Yeah.
and brown. And
Yeah.
so, you know, there's been a lot of those conversations. Actually, on Thursday, there's a big march between my hood and that hood, Black and brown, and we're going to come together and walk through a very scary part of the neighborhood to bring the two cultures and subcultures and gang cultures and skin colors and even church beliefs, you know, because there's
Wow.
Pentecostals and Baptists and evangelicals, and our church is non-denominational. Like, it's saying, you know what I've been telling my church people, what I've been learning from the Lord during this time is that people are desperate for godly things right now.
Wow.
I believe that God is wanting there to be unity.
Yeah.
I believe, well, yeah, that's what God is, right? He wants, even in our diversity, we can still be unified.
Yeah.
And I see the pain, and I see the protesting, and I see the looting, and I see the funeral service today, and I see a heart of a nation, of a people
Wow.
that seek the things of God. And because of that, I know that whenever I had to go outside, I was doing the Lord's work. It sounded crazy, and it was probably a little not safe at points, you know, where I had to look at my girl and be like, I know your dad is a police officer and he had to walk outside and there were scary nights, and I don't want to do this to you either.
Right.
I know that this is where I need to go. And God is good. And even if something bad happened, I know that God would have been still good during that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of reconciliation that we're still working on, and there's a team that's dedicated to that. You know, I'm a lot more on the church end of things and learning how to engage our community to look at this and say, hey, this is our problem. The people of God need to stand up and scream for unity and look for those moments to bring people together. We don't need to other-ize it and make it something for somebody else to do. We need to be a reflection of that. It's kind of hard because our church is Hispanic, right? And because we live in a segregated neighborhood, and other churches are just white, and some are just Asian, and some are just Black. But it doesn't mean that we can't talk about and try and unite in different ways, to say, at the end of the day, it's not left or right, it's not Black or white, we're the people of God. And that takes over. And we're learning how to do that more, and we're learning how to love our neighbors better. And through this, we've learned that we could do more. And I'm trying to figure out what that means for me and what it means for our church.
Wow. I love you use the word other-ize.
Yeah.
It's easy to other-ize in times like this. And I think even hearing your story, I would imagine most people watching this are, you know, picking their lower jaw up a little bit. It's just a unique place. I know last week we were talking on the phone, and you said, oh man, I just heard 15 gunshots across the street. Like, that's otherworldly. And it's possible, I think, in times like this, for people to say, I can't imagine that context. Segregated city, down to the imaginary lines between neighborhoods. Then within neighborhoods, you've got the segregation of gangs. Then within the segregation of gangs, you have this, you know, I'm against you unless someone else comes, and then we team up. Like, it's so layered. And I think that would be kind of like the epicenter in many ways of what division looks like, let's say. It's possible in a more subtle environment for people to say, I don't think we have a problem. We don't have invisible lines. We don't have this segregated, you know, nature. We live amongst one another. I think we're pretty good compared to. But what do you think the principles are in the midst of what is so clearly defined in your context? What are the principles that apply in Vancouver, or apply in San Francisco, or apply, you know, in wherever we might find ourselves, saying there's still, like, being people of reconciliation, not other-izing it. The church ought to not be on the side critiquing what's going wrong, but get right up in the middle of it and build relationships. Do you see other principles at play?
Oh man, I mean, yeah, you listed off some big ones. I think it's dangerous when we find ourselves comfortable and satisfied with what we do. I think that what our problem here in Chicago is a part of the problem for your church too, right? Because we're one body. We may be under a different banner, but we all have a lordship, right? And we all have that unity that when I go visit your church one day, I'll be greeted by family at your church. And if you guys ever come down here to Chicago, please don't be scared with all that I'm sharing.
Oh man.
But know that we have a unity that's beyond what we could even imagine. And I just find that principle of just learning, and this is something I'm still learning, learning what it means to not feel like we've done what we know and that should be enough. I'm learning what it means to do more. And yeah, people can say whatever they want about Chicago and about all this craziness, but I think here's the thing. I grew up here and I didn't have any kids before I was married. People are like, "Oh my God, who are you?" Right. People, I didn't push any carriages before, I graduated high school. People thought, "Wow, what a crazy weird dude." Yeah. But God saved me from a lot. I should have died a long time ago. I shouldn't have seen 18, but for some reason he kept me around, and I want to make sure I do my part. And so there's like little things that you could do that maybe are subconscious, but mean a big difference for people. Yeah. I didn't understand that when I was growing up. I didn't understand that people they thought it was weird that I didn't have a baby, or I didn't, get girls pregnant, or I wasn't in jail, or I didn't get shot. For them, it was a testimony. For them, it was something, what makes you so different like that? Right. And yeah, I have parents and I went to school and all that, but I found a relationship with the Lord. And he found me and rescued me and changed me, and he's still doing it. There's a lot of work. Yeah. But I just find myself saying in an environment like this, I don't want to stay satisfied with what I know or what I'm doing. And that's scary. I'm not even gonna front. I don't know what that means. I don't know what I'm getting myself into by saying that, because there's a lot of situations where God says, okay, you said that, let's see where this goes. But I don't want to say other people have bigger problems and I just need to deal with mine, because that's another layer of division, another layer Absolutely. Of separation, another layer of good luck. I got COVID over here. Deal with your stuff. We're all dealing with our stuff. That's another mentality. That's another, and maybe it's not a gang culture thing. I always call it gang mentality, where I take care of mine, you take care of yours. But that's dangerous. That's so anti-Christ. That's so anti-Bible. That's anti-church. I don't want to limit myself with what I know and what I grew up with and the code of the street to say that's how I'm going to live out my religion and say this is my walk. That's another, very skinny view of looking at the gospel when it's such a corporate, all enveloping, if your church is going through something painful, my church wants to, we should mourn with you and we need to pray for you because we need to be healthy together. And so I guess, you mentioned some principles, and I'm just learning right now, like stepping out and being uncomfortable. And I mean, right now, race talk is weird and crazy and it's uncomfortable as ever. And I've been challenged by that. And I think that as a believer, if we keep that mentality up of saying there can be more, right? There's something that I'm responsible for. Yeah. And I would feel like such a punk if the world is doing all the work and the church is watching. Like, are you serious? That's what the church is, a movement. A church is a living movement that's joining into what God is doing. And so if God is going to use the world because the church is slacking, oh my God, what a dangerous organization are we
Come on,
belonging
man.
to if we're letting the world and the nature outside of us do more than what we're doing, just because of fear or complacency or comfort or otherizing and saying that's a Chicago problem, that's a Vancouver problem, that's a black problem, that's a brown problem, that's a white problem.
Right.
I think that's other subdivision dividers that are pushing us to say, man, if we learn, and I'm still trying to find like what that unity in Christ is and what that unity in the body is. And this type of environment and situations, it's kind of weird. If I haven't gone through this, I don't know if I would get to this point.
Yeah.
But I don't think you need to go through these things to get to these points either. I believe that God is teaching us in many ways. I think it's just sometimes we need to pay attention to that. Right. And if this conversation, you know, when you talked to me about it and you said, you know, you want to have a conversation for your church, I was like, hey, if we're going to make Jesus famous, I'm down for it, because it's not about me. It's not about anything outside of what the Lord can do. And I hope that, you know, these type of narratives can be written in any place, despite the situation. You know, I would, there's times where I wish I lived in a suburb, you know, where I could live in a place where I don't need to listen to the street like that, you know? But if God has me here, it doesn't mean I'm better than people that live in the suburb. It just means I have a different task and I have to be faithful to that. So I hope I answered a couple of those principles there.
Absolutely, man. I think that, like we've been saying it in church, there's no such thing as perfect statements that change things. It's real conversations. And I think really for anyone who's watching this, this is a different look through the same prism. Where what you're experiencing right now, I love what you said. We can't just say, well, you deal with your thing, I'll deal with my thing. In the book of Galatians, it says we should all bear our own weight. Amen. And in the very same statement, it says, and we should all bear the weight of others. In other words, we can't push our problem onto someone else and say, that's your problem, deal with it. Nor can we, get buried under the problem ourselves. Like, it's my problem. And if it's my problem, it's our problem. Hey, this is your situation. If that's your situation, it's our situation. I think that's what's taking place when you see around the world people saying, we actually are not going to be okay without justice anymore. Yeah. And this is not for the church to sit back and say, wow, lots of things happening in our world. This is the very purpose for which God called us.
I agree.
To see those who are on the fringe, those who are the least, the last, the lost, the lonely, the hurting, the dying, the disenfranchised, those who have been oppressed, to see them all brought into unity and understand that the value that God has put on them has nothing to do with what society said about them, has nothing to do with whether that's positive or negative, has nothing to do with the color of their skin, nothing to do with the accent they speak with, nothing to do with which side of an invisible line they live on, that Jesus is calling us into new life, you know, as your church is titled, that Jesus is calling us into something that is so much bigger than our history. Like, our future is bright, even though our past is dark. And I think what I'm noting around the world right now is an ownership of people saying, in that way, I'm relating to what you're saying. People saying, not on my block. Yeah. You know, when it comes to racism, not on my block. That's right. Like when it comes to these unspoken tensions, these hatreds, not on not in my workplace, not around my dinner table, not in my community. Hey, that better not happen on a train when I'm on that train, because wherever I stand, like, I'm bringing peace to that equation. And I love the picture you're saying, going to your wife, hey, I need to get outside and just bring a little bit of peace. Yeah. And truthfully, like, I know you to be a humble guy. Like I'm sure within your mind, you're like, what do I actually bring to this equation? Like, I'm just going to stroll outside and bring peace. But that's exactly what you're doing by the power of the Holy Spirit. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I would say to anyone watching, you look at a situation that seems hopeless. You look at brokenness in the society and you're like, I don't know what I can do to solve this. do I lift a poster at a thing? Do I post a photo? Do I give to a cause? Do I, what do I do? You bring peace. That's what you do. You walk in the presence of the Holy Spirit, and you put yourselves in position where peace is needed, and you're the conduit of reconciliation. Now, I'm going to use otherness. I'm taking that. Well, we're not living like, hey, that's someone else's problem in their time, in their era, in their neighborhood. That's my problem. It's happening on the planet right now. This is what we came for. And so I thank you so much, Ken, for sharing that story. You're right. It would be a movie, and it would be a wonderfully horrific scene from a movie to live in the midst of this type of tension, and to experience both loss and heartbreak, and yet in the brokenness, man, God is doing something so beautiful.
Amen.
And we're going to be praying, even as you do that march, that it will be a reconciling, unifying cry. I think it's such a beautiful thing. Thanks so much for sharing that piece of your story.